Tell me, the man beside her whispered, voice clipped by panic. Who are you? Really? Evelyn Hart didn't turn her head. She stood at the edge of the titanium tech and supply chain summit stage, under lights so bright they made the audience a single dark sea, faces hidden, power anonymous. The air smelled like expensive cologne and warm circuitry. Cameras hovered like insects, red lights blinking, waiting for a scandal to hatch. Behind her, a screen the size of a building glowed with one sentence. Pierce Meridian Logistics, debt position, primary creditor. Then a name appeared in clean, calm type, Phoenix Crown Holdings. And beneath it, like a signature written with a steady hand while the world shook, Evelyn Hart, CEO. A murmur rolled through the crowd, a ripple of disbelief, a few nervous laughs that died quickly when they realized no one else was laughing. In the front row, Graham Pierce sat perfectly still. He'd worn the same kind of suit for years, navy, tailored, the fabric almost arrogant. His hair was the same careful shade of executive. His posture was the same manufactured confidence that had once fooled Evelyn into thinking it meant safety. But now his eyes were locked on the screen the way a drowning man watches a life raft drift away. Evelyn watched him for a single quiet second. Not with rage, not with triumph, with something far more dangerous. Clarity. She stepped forward to the podium. The microphone caught the soft sound of her breath, and it echoed, amplified across the hall. Somewhere in the darkness, a phone rang and was silenced immediately. I'm aware, Evelyn said, voice smooth enough to be mistaken for kindness, that some of you are surprised to see me here. A camera zoomed in on her hands. They weren't shaking. Her fingers rested lightly on the podium's edge, long, steady, unadorned except for a slim ring that was not a wedding band. Her nails were neat, practical, hands built for work, not decoration. Graham blinked hard, as if the screen might change if he did it fast enough. Evelyn continued. For 10 years, Pierce Meridian Logistics has been praised as a miracle of modern supply chain engineering. Its founder has been celebrated as a visionary who rebuilt the backbone of commerce. She paused. And yet, she said, letting the words stretch like a blade being drawn, the backbone has fractures. A few heads tilted, a few pens lifted. The audience leaned forward, the way people do when they sense blood in the water, even if they pretend they're here for innovation panels and polite applause. Evelyn pressed a button. The screen changed. A timeline. A set of numbers. Maintenance budgets sliced down quarter after quarter. Safety compliance audits postponed. Incident reports reclassified with euphemisms. Near misses called minor operational irregularities. In the first row, Graham's mouth opened slightly, then shut. His face had that strange, pale look of a man who suddenly remembers every locked drawer in his house and wonders which key he misplaced. Before this summit ends, Evelyn said, Pierce Meridian Logistics will need to answer a simple question. She looked directly into the front row. Is this company built on efficiency or on fraud? The crowd exhaled as one, some in anger, some in delight. Graham stood abruptly, chair scraping. The sound was sharp, ugly, an interruption meant to reclaim control. His lips moved without a microphone, but Evelyn could read them. You can't do this. She watched him the way she might watch a storm from behind thick glass. I can, she said softly, though no one else could hear it. Not through the mic, not through the speakers, but he heard it anyway, because some sentences don't need volume, they just need truth. From the side of the stage, a man stepped into the edge of the light. Not a bodyguard, not an assistant, not a smiling sponsor. He was tall, spare, composed in a way that felt unnatural in rooms like this, the kind of composure that comes from living among sharks and learning not to bleed. Silas Blackwood, the Wall Street ghost. He didn't look at the audience, he looked at Evelyn, and in his gaze there was a question and an answer at the same time. Are you ready? And, We're already past ready." Graham's eyes flicked to Silas, and something in his expression broke. Fear, real and immediate. Because Graham knew a lot of things. He knew how to manipulate boardrooms and charm journalists. He knew how to make people doubt themselves. He knew how to smile while cutting someone's life apart. But he also knew the name Silas Blackwood, the way sailors know certain currents. You don't fight them. You don't outrun them. You only pray you never meet them. Evelyn's voice carried again through the hall. "This is not a personal announcement," she let that sink in. "This is business." The audience shifted. People loved it when cruelty wore a suit and called itself logic. Evelyn pressed another button. A contract appeared. Stamped, signed, and at the bottom, in bold, "Creditors' rights, immediate review." Graham's face tightened, jaw ticking once. His hands clenched, then released. He turned toward the aisle like he might leave, like he might run. But the doors at the back of the hall were suddenly guarded by security staff. Calm, professional, not looking at him, just standing. Evelyn watched all of it, and the memory came like a piano chord, unexpected, painful, familiar. The sound of a door closing, the sound of someone saying, "You'll be fine." The sound of rain, and a voice, her own, asking years ago in a kitchen lit by cold morning sun, "Are we okay, Graham?" And his voice, warm as a lie, "Of course we are." Evelyn lifted her chin. "Before you decide what you think about me," she told the hall, "I want you to understand why I'm here." She let the silence widen. "Because this story," she said, "doesn't start on this stage." Her gaze slid briefly to Silas. A single nod passed between them. "It starts," Evelyn whispered, "in the rain." And as the hall held its breath, the world rewound, not gently, not kindly, but like a tape ripped backward with urgent hands. The courthouse hallway smelled like paper and stale coffee. Evelyn stood beside a bench that looked like it had held 1,000 broken people. Her fingers were wrapped around a folder so tightly the edges bent. She wore a coat she'd owned for years, wool, black, practical. Not new, not dramatic. She had considered dressing up. She had considered looking strong. But strength, she'd learned, was not lipstick and sharp heels. Strength was standing still while someone tried to erase you. Across the hallway, Graham Pierce laughed with his attorney. It was a quiet laugh, controlled, like he'd rehearsed it. The kind of laugh meant to tell everyone within earshot that he was unbothered. Like this wasn't his marriage ending. Like this was a line item. His attorney, a woman with perfectly shaped eyebrows and a voice made of ice, leaned in close, whispering something. Graham glanced at Evelyn, then looked away as if she were an inconvenient poster on the wall. 10 years. A decade of mornings and nights, of shared routines, of holidays, of arguments that ended with apologies that were never real. 10 years of Evelyn pushing her own needs aside because Graham's dreams mattered more. And now, in a courthouse hallway, she realized she had been living in a building that didn't belong to her. The judge's door opened. A clerk called their names. Inside, the courtroom was smaller than Evelyn had imagined. Less dramatic, more cruel, because everything was ordinary. No thunder, no cinematic music. Just a wooden bench, a seal on the wall, and a bored stenographer. Graham sat with one leg crossed over the other like he was in a meeting. Evelyn sat straight, hands folded, nails digging into her own skin. The judge spoke about irreconcilable differences and mutual agreement, using words that made it sound like they'd both decided to stop being in love. Evelyn wanted to stand up and shout. There was no mutual. But she had learned over the years that in rooms like this, emotion made you look unreliable. Graham's attorney slid documents forward. "Mr. Pierce is offering a generous settlement," she said, sweet as poison. "A clean break, minimal conflict." Evelyn stared at the pages. The settlement was not generous. It was a polite robbery, a small apartment, no claim to the company, no claim to stock options, no claim to the intellectual property she'd designed in the early days when Pierce Meridian Logistics had been nothing but a rented warehouse and Graham's swagger. Evelyn's throat tightened. Graham leaned toward the microphone. "Evelyn," he said, voice softened for the judge, "I'm not trying to hurt you, but I need this merger to go through cleanly." Merger. The word was a guillotine. Evelyn had heard about Van Torix Corporation in whispers for months. The rumored deal, the strategic alignment, the future of logistics. Graham had come home later and later, smelled like airports and expensive bars. When she'd asked, he'd said, "It's business, Ev. Don't make it personal." Now he was making it her funeral. The judge looked at Evelyn. "Mrs. Pierce, do you agree to these terms?" Evelyn swallowed. She opened her mouth, and Graham's attorney cut in smoothly. "Your Honor, Mr. Pierce is willing to expedite the process. Mrs. Pierce will leave the marital home within 72 hours. Mr. Pierce will ensure her belongings are packed and delivered." Evelyn's fingers trembled for the first time. Her belongings. Her life reduced to belongings. She looked at Graham. "So that's it?" she asked quietly. Graham's expression didn't change. "It's cleaner this way." Cleaner. As if she were a stain. Evelyn signed, not because she agreed, because she understood something in that moment. The room was built for him. When the judge finalized it, the gavel sounded like a door locking. Outside, the hallway felt colder. Graham walked past Evelyn without stopping. She reached out, not even thinking, fingers brushing the sleeve of his suit. He paused, turned, and for a second his eyes softened. Then they hardened again like metal cooling. "What?" he asked. Evelyn's voice came out smaller than she wanted. "The piano," she said. "My mother's piano. I want it." Graham blinked. "The old thing?" "It's not an old thing," Evelyn said, the words sharp now. "It's my mother." He exhaled, looking past her. "I donated it," he said casually, as if he were talking about extra chairs. Evelyn's brain refused to accept it. "You what?" "It was taking up space," Graham said, shrugging. "And frankly, Ev, it was depressing. I thought it would be better. Gone." Gone. Like her. Evelyn's chest tightened so hard she thought she might fold in half. "Where?" she whispered. Graham's attorney stepped in, smiling. "A charity. It's out of your hands." Graham leaned closer, voice low, intimate, cruel. "You'll be fine," he said, the same words he'd used 1,000 times when she'd been worried about bills or repairs or anything he didn't want to deal with. Then he straightened. "Take care, Evelyn," and he walked away. Evelyn stood there, holding her empty folder, watching the man she'd loved disappear into the crowded hallway. Outside, rain had begun to fall. Not a gentle drizzle. A hard, relentless rain that soaked through coats and pretenses. Evelyn stepped out of the courthouse and let it hit her face. It felt like the city was trying to wash something off her. She didn't have a car anymore. Graham had needed it for business. She didn't have a home. She had 72 hours to vacate. She didn't have the piano, the last object that had connected her to her mother's hands, her mother's laugh, her mother's lullabies. She walked. The streets blurred. Every storefront reflected her back at herself. A woman with wet hair, mascara smudging, eyes too wide. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. A message from her friend. "Come over, I'll make tea. You can stay as long as you need." Evelyn stared at the screen until the words swam. Tea. A small kindness in a world of knives. She walked toward the address, rain pouring into her sleeves. But her feet were numb. Her brain was fog. And in that fog, she took a wrong turn. A single wrong turn, and her entire life rerouted. Old Westbury didn't feel like New York. It felt like a different country, built for a different species of human. The streets were wider. The trees were older. The houses were hidden behind gates that whispered, "You don't belong here." Evelyn didn't realize she was in the wrong neighborhood until she saw the gravel driveways and the ironwork fences. By then, her phone was at 5%, her hair was dripping, and her hands were so cold she could barely feel the device. She stood at the end of a long driveway, squinting through rain. A house loomed beyond, stone, dark windows, lights minimal. Not her friend's place, not even close. Evelyn laughed once, breathless, the sound almost hysterical. Of course. Even the directions betrayed her tonight. She turned to go, and thunder rolled, close enough to vibrate in her ribs. Her phone died. The screen went black. Evelyn stared at it as if staring might bring it back. Then the rain intensified, and she couldn't see the road clearly. She couldn't call a ride. She couldn't even check a map. She stepped closer to the house, instinct pushing her toward the only shelter she could see. At the door, she hesitated. She imagined headlines. Divorced woman found trespassing in mansion. She imagined Graham's laugh. She imagined the judge's bored eyes. But the cold was biting, and she was tired of being the person who always handled things alone. She raised her hand and knocked. Once. Twice. Nothing. She knocked again, harder. For a long moment she heard only rain. Then, inside, something moved. A lock clicked. The door opened a few inches. A man stood there, half hidden by shadow. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wasn't smiling. He looked unfinished, like a sketch drawn in charcoal. Sharp lines, dark eyes, hair slightly too long, as if he didn't allow barbers or anyone else the privilege of touching him. He studied Evelyn like she was a math problem he hadn't expected to see. Yes? His voice was low, careful. Evelyn's throat felt raw. I'm so sorry, she said quickly. I think I have the wrong address. My phone died. I'm just... She stopped because her voice cracked, and she hated that it cracked. The man's gaze flicked over her, soaked coat, trembling hands, the way she tried to stand tall and failed. You're drenched, he observed, like it was a fact without judgment. I know, Evelyn said, wiping rain from her cheek. I didn't mean to... He opened the door wider. Warm air poured out like a promise. Come in, he said. Evelyn blinked. No, Come in, he repeated firmer. You'll freeze. Something in his tone made it not an invitation, but an instruction. A kind one. A strange one. Evelyn stepped inside. The house smelled like cedar and old books, not flowers, not perfume, not staged luxury. It smelled lived in, but quietly, as if whoever lived here didn't perform life for visitors. The foyer was dim. A single lamp cast a pool of gold on the floor. Evelyn's wet shoes squeaked against stone. The man closed the door behind her and the outside world vanished. For a second, Evelyn's ears rang with silence. Then she realized there was a faint sound in the background. Music. Not playing from a speaker. From somewhere deeper in the house, soft and hesitant, like someone had been testing notes. A piano. Evelyn's chest tightened again. Her eyes lifted automatically toward the sound, as if her body moved before her mind could stop it. The man followed her gaze. You play? He asked. Evelyn swallowed. My mother did, she said. The words came out before she could soften them. The man's expression shifted slightly, like something inside him recognized grief. He didn't ask questions. He walked to a side table and picked up a towel. Sit, he said, gesturing to a bench near the wall. Evelyn sat because her legs didn't trust themselves anymore. He handed her the towel. His fingers brushed hers, cool, steady, not lingering. Thank you, she murmured. He watched her dry her face, then said, You said your phone died. Yes. He nodded once and moved toward a hallway. I'll get you a charger, he said. Evelyn hesitated. I really don't want to impose. You're already inside, he replied without looking back. It wasn't rude. It was simply true. Evelyn let out a weak, watery laugh. As he disappeared into the hall, she stared at the rain streaking the glass door. Her hands tightened around the towel. Her mind raced through a list of what-ifs. Who was he? Was this safe? Should she leave? But her body, her exhausted, bruised body, craved warmth too much to move. When he returned, he held a phone cable like it was a tool, not a gift. He plugged her phone in and watched the screen light up, then stepped back. There, he said. Evelyn exhaled. Her friend's address was a few miles away. Not impossible, but without a ride, it might as well have been another state. "I'll call," Evelyn began. "Wait," the man interrupted softly. He looked at her, really looked, and his eyes narrowed not in suspicion but in recognition. "You're Evelyn Hart," he said. The name hit her like someone calling her from a dream. Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Yes," she said, cautious. Do I know you?" He didn't answer immediately. He walked toward a doorway leading into a darker room. "Come," he said, voice quieter now. "I want to show you something." Evelyn stood slowly, the towel still in her hands. She followed him into a study. The room was lined with screens and whiteboards full of diagrams, networks, arrows, equations, logistics routes like veins. On one wall, a framed magazine cover showed a shadowed figure with the headline, "The Wall Street Ghost, the man who moves markets without showing his face." The photo was deliberately vague, but the posture matched. Evelyn stared. "Silas Blackwood," she whispered. He watched her reaction carefully, like he'd been studying human emotion from a distance for years. "Yes," he said. Evelyn's heart hammered. "Why do you know my name?" Silas walked to a whiteboard. He tapped a section filled with flowcharts, a structure so familiar Evelyn's breath caught. "This," he said, "is the core logistics architecture that made Pierce Meridian Logistics scalable." Evelyn's mouth went dry. "That's," she began. Silas turned to her. "It's yours," he said. The words landed heavy. Evelyn felt dizzy. "How do you—" "Because I've been watching Pierce Meridian for years," Silas said. "And because whoever designed that system solved a problem I spent a decade on." He paused. "And because your design choices are distinctive." Evelyn's hands trembled again, but this time not from cold. She remembered late nights in a drafty warehouse, sketching routes on stained paper, calculating storage density, timing, failure points. She remembered Graham bringing coffee, praising her, calling her brilliant, then later calling it his. Silas studied her with something like respect. "Pierce Meridian stole your work," he said plainly. Or at least, he buried the truth of who built it. Evelyn's throat tightened. "I was his wife," she whispered. "He didn't steal—" Silas's gaze sharpened. "Wives can be stolen from too," he said quietly, just more politely. Evelyn stared at him, and a strange thing happened. For the first time since the courthouse, she didn't feel like a ghost. Someone saw her, not as Graham's accessory, not as collateral damage, as a mind, a maker. Silas's voice softened. "You came here by accident," he said, "or by the kind of accident the universe uses when it's tired of watching people suffer." Evelyn swallowed. "What do you want?" she asked. Silas looked at the diagrams. "Reckoning," he said. And when he said it, the room felt colder. Not from lack of heat, from the promise of fire. Silas didn't offer Evelyn pity. He offered her a seat at a table she didn't know existed. They began with a single conversation that lasted until dawn. Rain hammered the windows like a metronome. Evelyn sat on the edge of a leather chair, still in her wet coat, fingers wrapped around a mug of tea that Silas had made without asking what she liked. It wasn't sweet. It wasn't fancy. It was hot, plain, honest. Silas moved through the room with quiet efficiency, pulling documents from drawers, opening encrypted files on screens. He spoke in a voice that never rose, never performed. "Pierce Meridian is negotiating a merger with Vanterix Corporation," he said. "Their CEO is Dorian Crown." Evelyn's stomach tightened at the name. She'd seen it in business news. A man who smiled like he'd never been told no. A company that swallowed competitors and called it synergy. Silas's eyes darkened. "Dorian Crown stole an algorithm from me years ago," he said. "Not the code itself, the concept, the architecture." Evelyn blinked. "How?" Silas's jaw tightened once. He had access he shouldn't have had. He had people he paid to look the other way. And he had a talent for making victims look like they imagined the crime. Evelyn stared at her tea. That last sentence felt uncomfortably familiar. Silas continued. Pierce Meridian is valuable to Van Torix because of its network, warehouses, contracts, routes. But Pierce Meridian is also fragile. He tapped a key. A map lit up on the screen, dots across the East Coast connected by lines like a nervous system. Those warehouses, Silas said, are not owned outright. Most are leased, some are financed, many are leveraged. Evelyn's mind shifted into work mode automatically. So if someone controlled the leases, or the debt, Silas finished. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Silas leaned back. I don't want revenge that feels good for a day, he said. I want correction. I want the truth to have weight. Evelyn's voice came out hoarse. And you think I can help you? Silas's gaze held hers. I know you can, he said. He pushed a folder toward her. Inside were copies of documents Evelyn recognized immediately. Early design notes, old emails, project plans. Her handwriting scanned from a notebook she thought she'd lost in a move. Her stomach flipped. How did you... I collect evidence, Silas said simply. I don't like relying on memory. Evelyn's fingers hovered over the pages like they might burn. In the courthouse, she'd been treated like she had no proof of her own life. Here, in this quiet study, proof lay in front of her like a weapon. Silas watched her carefully. Evelyn, he said, you built the engine. Graham just painted the hood. Her throat tightened. A long silence settled. Then Evelyn whispered, What are you offering? Silas didn't smile. An alliance, he said. You take back what was taken from you. I take back what was taken from me. We do it legally, cleanly. So clean no one can call it theft. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. And what do I become in your plan? Silas's gaze didn't flinch. The face, he said. The CEO. Evelyn stared at him. CEO of what? Silas slid another file across the desk. On the first page, in bold letters, Phoenix Crown Holdings, Incorporation Draft. Evelyn read the name twice. Phoenix, the thing that burns and returns. Crown, the thing Graham had worn like he deserved it. Her heart hammered. You want me to run it? Silas's voice was calm. I want you to own it, he corrected. Evelyn laughed once, short, disbelieving. I just got divorced. I don't have a house. I don't have money. I don't even... You have competence, Silas said. That's rarer. Evelyn stared at him. In the dim light, Silas didn't look like a savior. He looked like a man who'd been hurt and refused to die from it. Why me? Evelyn asked, softer now. Silas's eyes flicked to the whiteboard. Because Graham believes you're gone, he said. He believes you're broken. That makes you invisible to him. He leaned forward slightly. And because you're the only person alive who truly understands how his network breathes. Evelyn swallowed. Silas stood. If you agree, he said, this won't be quick. You'll learn things you've avoided learning. Finance, law, negotiation. Not the polite kind, the kind where every smile hides a trap. Evelyn's stomach twisted. But, Silas added quieter, you will never be helpless again. The rain kept falling outside like applause. Evelyn looked down at the folder, at her own handwriting, at the proof of her mind. She thought of the piano, her mother's hands on ivory keys, teaching her not just music but discipline. Play the note clean, even if the room is noisy. She thought of Graham's face when he said, it was taking up space. She lifted her eyes to Silas. Okay, she said. One word, but it felt like striking a match. Training didn't look like Hollywood montages. It looked like exhaustion. It looked like Evelyn sitting at Silas's kitchen table at 2 a.m., learning to read debt covenants the way she once read route maps. It looked like her voice shaking the first time she practiced saying, no, without apologizing afterward. Silas gave her no compliments she didn't earn. When she nailed a negotiation simulation, he nodded once, like that was the highest praise in his vocabulary. When she failed, He didn't soften it. Again, he'd say. And Evelyn would swallow her pride and start over. They built Phoenix Crown Holdings like a quiet storm, not with flashy press releases, with phone calls to banks, with meetings with lawyers in rooms that smelled like old leather and sharper ambition, with small purchases that looked meaningless to outsiders. A piece of debt here, a minor claim there, a warehouse lease option acquired through a shell entity no one noticed. Evelyn learned that companies didn't collapse from one dramatic punch. They collapsed from pressure applied in the right places, at the right time. Silas had a network of people, analysts, legal experts, former executives who owed him favors or feared him. He kept them distant. He kept everything distant. Except Evelyn. She noticed it the way you notice warmth in a cold room. Silas would speak to others in clipped, efficient sentences. With Evelyn, he sometimes paused before answering, as if he cared that she understood, not just obeyed. One night, after a brutal day of meetings, Evelyn found herself in the study, staring at the whiteboard again. Silas entered quietly, a glass of water in his hand. "You're thinking too loud," he said. Evelyn didn't turn. "I'm thinking about the piano," she admitted. Silas's footsteps stopped behind her. "For years," Evelyn continued, voice steady, "I thought the worst thing he did was leave me." She finally looked at Silas. "But giving away my mother's piano, it wasn't about space. It was about making sure I couldn't go back to who I was." Silas's gaze tightened. He set the water down and said quietly, "People like Graham don't just take what they want. They take what you are." Evelyn's throat tightened. "I want it back," she whispered. Silas nodded once. "Then we'll take it back," he said, not as a romantic vow, as a promise of strategy. They struck the first blow 3 months later. A mid-level finance company held a portion of Pierce Meridian's warehouse debt. It was small enough that Graham never paid attention to it. Phoenix Crown did. Evelyn sat in a conference room with 2 bankers who thought they were meeting a new investor. Silas sat in the corner, silent, a shadow. The banker smiled too brightly. "This debt portfolio isn't particularly exciting," he said. "It's stable, but—" "It's undervalued," Evelyn said, tone calm. The banker blinked. "Excuse me?" Evelyn slid a sheet across the table, an analysis she'd built herself. It showed risk, probability of default, leverage ratios. It also showed something the banker had missed: the clauses that allowed creditors to demand reviews under certain safety compliance conditions. The banker's smile faded. Evelyn watched the moment he realized she wasn't guessing. She wasn't bluffing. She was reading the engine. "We'll take it," Evelyn said. The banker swallowed. "For that price?" Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "For that price," she confirmed. Silas's eyes watched her with something like approval. Phoenix Crown acquired the debt. A small acquisition, barely a whisper. But Evelyn felt it like a piano note struck clean in a silent room. They continued, piece by piece, warehouse by warehouse, debt by debt, lease option by lease option. They became invisible owners of Graham's foundations. And Graham, obsessed with the Van Torix merger, didn't notice the ground changing beneath him. He was busy being celebrated, busy being interviewed, busy being praised, busy believing the world belonged to him. Evelyn watched his interviews online sometimes late at night, the volume low. Graham would talk about resilience and innovation. He would smile and say, "We've built something extraordinary." And Evelyn would whisper to the screen, "No, I did." Silas never commented, but he would sometimes stop by the doorway, see what she was watching, and say quietly, "He's loud because he's afraid of silence." Evelyn would turn off the screen and feel her spine straighten, because silence was where she lived now. Silence, strategy, and a fire that didn't burn out. The Titanium Summit arrived like a drumbeat. For Graham, it was a victory lap. For Evelyn, it was a stage. In the weeks leading up, the city's billboards flashed Pierce Meridian's logo beside Vantorix's sleek branding. Rumors swelled. Biggest merger in the sector, disruptive synergy, market domination. Graham walked into every room like he already owned the future. Evelyn prepared like someone who knew the future could be seized. Silas didn't dress her. He didn't transform her into a different person. He made sure the version of her that already existed wasn't hidden anymore. "You don't need to look expensive," he told her one evening as she tried on a simple black dress in her apartment's small bathroom. "You need to look inevitable." Evelyn stared at her reflection. She looked like herself, just sharpened. The night of the summit, she arrived in a car with tinted windows, stepping out into a storm of camera flashes. Rain threatened, clouds heavy above Manhattan, but for now the air was dry, charged. Inside, the hall buzzed. Executives clustered like schools of fish. Sponsors smiled. Influencers pretended to care about logistics. Evelyn walked through them as if the crowd parted naturally. It didn't. People simply moved without realizing why, because there was something different about her. Not arrogance, certainty. From across the room, Graham spotted her. His smile faltered. He stared as if he'd seen a ghost wearing her face. Then his expression recovered, quickly, professionally. He strode toward her, shoulders squared. "Evelyn," he said, voice too bright. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn met his gaze calmly. "Attending a summit," she said. Graham's eyes flicked over her dress, her posture, the lack of fear. "This is not your world anymore," he said softly, like advice. Evelyn's lips curved slightly. "I didn't realize you owned the world," she replied. His jaw tightened. "Don't do this," he hissed. "Not here." Evelyn leaned in just enough that only he could hear her. "I'm not doing anything to you," she said, voice silk. "I'm just finally showing up." Graham's eyes narrowed. "Who invited you?" Evelyn straightened. "Business invites me," she said. Before he could respond, a voice boomed through the speakers announcing the keynote panel. Graham's shoulders relaxed slightly. His favorite thing was a stage with a microphone. He stepped back and smiled again, forced warmth. "Enjoy the show," he said. Evelyn watched him walk away, and she felt something inside her unlock. Not revenge, release. On stage, Graham delivered his speech with practiced ease. He spoke about efficiency, global resilience, the future of supply chain. He told anecdotes meant to sound humble. The crowd applauded exactly where he wanted them to. Then the panel moderator announced a special surprise guest to discuss innovative creditor partnerships. A few confused laughs. Graham's smile tightened. Evelyn stepped into the light. For a heartbeat, the hall froze. Whispers surged. Who was she? Why did she look familiar? Graham's eyes widened slightly, then narrowed as the name on the screen appeared behind her. Evelyn Hart, CEO, Phoenix Crown Holdings. The moderator, oblivious to the blood in the water, smiled. "Ms. Hart, welcome. We're thrilled to have you." Evelyn nodded politely. She didn't look at Graham, not yet. The moderator asked about Phoenix Crown's rapid growth, asked about innovative investments. Evelyn answered smoothly, careful with words, letting the audience feel her competence without flashing the blade too soon. Then the moderator asked, "How did Phoenix Crown become involved with Pierce Meridian Logistics?" That was the cue. Evelyn turned her head toward Graham. He sat on the panel stage, microphone in hand, his smile rigid. Evelyn's voice stayed calm. "Phoenix Crown became involved," she said, "the same way any creditor becomes involved, through opportunity." Graham's laugh was sharp. "Creditor?" he repeated into his mic. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." Evelyn nodded once. "That's possible," she said. She pressed a button on the podium. The screen behind them changed. A list of debt positions appeared. Complex, dry, undeniable. At the bottom, in bold, primary creditor, Phoenix Crown Holdings. Gasps murmured. Graham's face went pale. He leaned into his microphone, voice too loud. This is, this is inappropriate. This is not— Evelyn lifted her hand slightly, not to silence him, but to steady the room. This isn't personal, she said into her mic. A few people laughed nervously. Evelyn's eyes stayed on Graham. This is business. She watched the phrase land on him like a slap, because it was his phrase, his favorite way to excuse cruelty. Now it belonged to her. The moderator blinked, bewildered. Ms. Hart, are you saying Phoenix Crown has a controlling financial interest in Pierce Meridian? Evelyn nodded. I'm saying Phoenix Crown is the largest creditor, she replied, and creditors have rights. Graham's hand trembled around the microphone. You can't do this, he snapped. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. You should read your covenants, she said quietly. The audience leaned forward. They didn't come for corporate law. They came for drama dressed in legal language. Evelyn pressed another button. Maintenance reductions, safety compliance delays, internal memos, a chart showing a pattern, quarter after quarter, Graham cutting corners while presenting growth. The room shifted. People who'd been smiling now looked uneasy. Investors exchanged glances. Journalists' fingers flew across screens. Graham stood abruptly. This is confidential, he barked. Evelyn's voice stayed calm. It was confidential, she corrected, until it became material, the moderator stammered. Ms. Hart, this is serious. Evelyn nodded. It is, she said. She turned fully toward the audience. I didn't come to ruin a man, she said, voice measured. I came to stop a system from harming people. A pause. And to correct a narrative. Her gaze returned to Graham. You've been praised as a visionary, she told him, but vision without integrity is just a trick. Graham's mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, he looked like what he was beneath the suit. A man who had gotten used to winning and didn't know what to do when the ground shifted. That night, the board meeting was scheduled, an emergency session called under creditor review clauses. Graham arrived furious, pushing through the boardroom doors like a king storming into a rebellion. The room smelled of polished wood and fear. Board members sat stiffly, eyes down. Legal counsel lined the walls. At the head of the table sat an empty chair, Graham's chair. Evelyn sat 2 seats away, calm as stone. When Graham saw her, his face twisted. You, he spat. You're behind this circus. Evelyn didn't move. Sit down, she said. Graham laughed harshly. You don't tell me what to— A board member cleared his throat. Mr. Pierce, he said, voice tight. Please sit. Graham froze. He looked around. He saw it then, the shift. People weren't meeting his eyes the way they used to. They were looking at Evelyn, at the documents in front of them, at the evidence. Graham sat slowly. Evelyn stood. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't demand pity. She presented facts. A ledger of decisions, a timeline of negligence. Emails where Graham used words like delay, hide, reclassify. She spoke of safety like it was sacred, because it was. People could die when logistics failed. People always forgot that, until they didn't. When she finished, the room was silent. Graham's voice cracked. This is revenge, he said weakly. Evelyn looked at him. I didn't need revenge, she said. You gave me a lesson. His eyes narrowed. What lesson? Evelyn's voice softened, and somehow that softness made it sharper. That I can live without you, she said. The vote happened quickly. Board members didn't want to debate. They wanted to survive. They voted to remove Graham as CEO pending investigation. Graham stood, chair scraping, face flushing red. You can't fire me, he shouted. This is my company. A board member glanced at the legal counsel, then at Evelyn. Evelyn spoke calmly. It was, she said, until you leveraged it into my hands. Graham's breath came out in a strangled sound. He looked at her as if trying to see the woman he'd once controlled. But Evelyn was no longer shaped by his gaze. She stepped toward the head of the table. The chair waited. Graham's chair. Evelyn placed her hand on it just for a moment. She thought of piano keys, of ownership, of what it meant to touch something and have it belong to you, not by permission, but by right. Then she sat, and the room, without applause, without celebration, accepted the new reality. Evelyn Hart was in control. And somewhere in the shadows near the door, Silas Blackwood watched, silent, unreadable, a ghost witnessing a resurrection. Power didn't feel like champagne. It felt like weight. In the days after Graham's removal, Evelyn barely slept. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Lawyers, auditors, board members, journalists. Phoenix Crown's name spread like wildfire. So did rumors. Some called Evelyn a genius. Others called her a gold digger with good timing. The cruelest ones called her a bitter ex-wife. Evelyn told herself she didn't care. But late at night, in the quiet of her apartment, the words echoed. Silas remained close, but not possessive. He didn't hover. He didn't declare anything. He simply appeared when she needed him. An email answered before she asked. A lawyer recommended. An analyst report delivered. He was presence without intrusion. And somehow that made Evelyn trust him more than anyone who'd ever promised her the world. Until one night, when her trust cracked. It happened in the simplest way. A message. Evelyn was in Silas's study. He'd invited her there to review a final legal strategy before the merger collapsed fully. Silas stepped out to take a call. Evelyn sat alone, scanning a document. Silas's phone lay on the desk, face up. It vibrated. A notification flashed. Dorian Crown. You get your algorithm back, I get my leverage. Don't pretend this is about her. Evelyn's breath stopped. Her fingers froze mid-page. Another message appeared. Dorian Crown. She's useful. You know it. Don't get sentimental. Evelyn's pulse thundered in her ears. The room tilted slightly, as if the floor had shifted. She stared at the screen. Her mind raced, searching for explanations, context, nuance, anything. But grief has a way of turning whispers into certainties. Evelyn remembered Graham's voice. It's business, Ev. She remembered the courthouse. She remembered signing papers while men decided her worth. She remembered being told she'd be fine as her life was dismantled. Her chest tightened. The door opened. Silas walked back in, phone still to his ear, expression focused. He ended the call when he saw her face. What's wrong? He asked, instantly alert. Evelyn stood so fast the chair scraped. She pointed at the phone. That, she said, voice shaking. That's wrong. Silas's gaze flicked to the screen. For the first time, something like frustration crossed his features. Evelyn. Don't, she snapped, surprising herself. Silas stepped closer, hands open slightly, not threatening. You saw a message, he said carefully. You don't know the full... I know enough, Evelyn said, eyes stinging. You're negotiating with him. You're using me, using my position, using my... Her voice broke and she hated herself for it. Silas's jaw tightened. I'm not using you. Evelyn shook her head, bitter laugh escaping. That's what Graham said too, she whispered. Silas's eyes darkened. I'm not Graham. Evelyn's voice rose. Then why does Dorian Crown think you are? Silas reached for the phone. Because he tries to provoke, he said. Because he wants you unstable. Evelyn backed away as if the gesture itself proved the point. Unstable, she repeated softly. That's convenient. Silas's face hardened, not cruelly, but with pain. Evelyn, he said, voice low, urgent. Look at me. You are not a tool. Evelyn's throat tightened. Then why does he talk like I am? She demanded. Silas took a breath as if choosing words. I was going to tell you, he said. Dorian reached out. He's panicking. He wants to bargain. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Bargain for what? Silas hesitated, half a second too long. Evelyn felt it like a knife. For your algorithm, she said, voice barely audible. Silas's silence confirmed it. Evelyn's heart dropped. She grabbed her coat. Silas stepped toward her. "Don't leave like this," he said. "Not tonight." Evelyn's eyes burned. "I left the last man who said he loved me," she whispered. "I can leave you too." Silas's expression shifted, something raw behind the composure. "I haven't asked you to love me," he said quietly. Evelyn froze, because he hadn't. He'd never demanded. He'd never promised. He'd simply been there. And somehow that made the misunderstanding worse, because it meant she couldn't label him cleanly as a villain. She could only label herself as a fool. Evelyn turned and walked out. Silas followed her to the door. "Evelyn!" he called. She didn't answer. Outside, rain had started again, light at first, then heavier. Manhattan glistened. The city looked beautiful when it wanted to hurt you. Evelyn walked quickly, not toward her apartment, but toward nowhere, just away. Her phone buzzed with calls. She ignored them. A car slowed near her curb. She didn't look. A door opened. Footsteps approached. Evelyn turned, and the world went wrong. A hand covered her mouth, not crushing but firm. A voice close to her ear. "Don't scream." Her body jolted. Panic flared. She fought, but another hand grabbed her arm. She was guided, pulled into the back seat of the car. The door shut. The smell of leather and something chemical filled her nose. Her heart slammed. A man in the front seat spoke calmly, as if ordering coffee. "Just cooperate, Ms. Hart. This will be easier." Evelyn's throat tightened. She tried to reach for her phone, but the man beside her took it. She stared out the window as the city moved past. Lights blurring, rain streaking glass. She felt suddenly very small again, like the courthouse, like the hallway, like a woman whose life belonged to other people. But then, somewhere deep, a piano note struck, her mother's voice, gentle and firm. "Play the note clean." Evelyn swallowed her fear. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She watched. She remembered faces. She listened to the rhythm of their speech. She memorized details the way she once memorized routes, because survival was just another kind of logistics. The place they brought her to wasn't a basement with chains. It was worse. It was polite. A private office in a building that smelled like new carpet and expensive silence. Evelyn was seated in a chair. Her hands were not bound, but the door behind her was guarded. Across from her sat Dorian Crown. In person, he looked like his photos, perfect teeth, perfect hair, perfect confidence. But his eyes were too still, predatory stillness. He smiled. "Evelyn Hart," he said warmly, "the woman of the hour." Evelyn stared at him. "If you're planning to threaten me," she said evenly, "do it quickly. I'm tired." Dorian laughed softly. "I like you," he said. "That's the problem." He leaned forward, placing a folder on the desk. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to sign this." Evelyn glanced at it. A transfer agreement, a surrender in legal clothing. Dorian's smile widened. "You sign," he said, "and you walk out of here with $10 million. Evelyn looked up. "And if I don't?" Dorian shrugged. "Then you'll discover how fragile your new empire is." Evelyn's jaw tightened. Dorian's voice softened, a performance of sympathy. "Don't pretend this is about pride," he said. "You were left with nothing once already. This is your chance to be smart." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Smart," she repeated. Dorian nodded. "Smart. You get cash. You disappear. You live." Evelyn stared at the paper. $10 million. A number meant to hypnotize, to make her forget, to make her grateful for scraps. She thought of Graham's settlement papers, the polite robbery. She thought of the piano being donated. She thought of every time she'd swallowed her anger to keep peace. Her fingers reached toward the pen. Dorian smiled, satisfied. Evelyn picked up the pen, and instead of signing, she lifted the contract and ripped it down the middle. Once, twice, into smaller pieces. The sound of tearing paper filled the room like thunder. Dorian's smile vanished. Evelyn dropped the pieces on the desk like ash. "No," she said, voice steady. "I won't sell myself to you." Dorian's eyes hardened. You're making a mistake. Evelyn met his gaze. I've made enough mistakes, she replied. One of them was believing men like you are inevitable. Dorian stood slowly. The guards shifted. Evelyn's heart hammered, but she didn't move. Dorian leaned close, voice cold now. You think Blackwood is saving you? He whispered. He's the same. He just hides it better. Evelyn swallowed. The doubt flared again, painful, sharp. Dorian smiled as if he could smell it. He wants his algorithm, he said softly. And you? You're a convenient mask. Evelyn's chest tightened. Then, from somewhere outside the office, a sound, a commotion, voices raised, footsteps running, a door slammed. Dorian straightened, frowning. The guards tensed. The door burst open. Silas Blackwood stepped in. Not rushing, not shouting, just walking forward as if the room belonged to him. The guards moved, then stopped. Because behind Silas came legal officers, security personnel, and men in suits holding badges. Dorian's face darkened. Blackwood, he snarled. You always had a flair for drama. Silas's gaze stayed on Evelyn. He took in her posture, the torn paper, the tension in her shoulders. Then his eyes lifted to Dorian. This isn't drama, Silas said quietly. This is consequence. Dorian laughed sharply. You're too late. Silas didn't blink. No, he said. I'm right on time. Dorian's smile returned brittle. You came for your algorithm, he said loud enough for everyone. Take it, trade it, or watch her lose everything. Evelyn's throat tightened. Silas's expression didn't change. He reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. He tapped once. A screen on the wall, previously displaying a calm corporate logo, flashed to a live web page. Lines of code, download links, a timestamp, a headline. Blackwood algorithm, open source released publicly. Dorian's face went blank. Evelyn's breath stopped. Silas's voice was steady. It's public, he said. Every line, every method, every variation. Dorian stared. You're lying. Silas shook his head once. No, he said. It's done. Evelyn's heart slammed. Silas, she began, shocked. Silas turned to her, eyes dark, unwavering. He can't threaten you with it now, Silas said softly. There's nothing left to hold over us. Dorian's voice rose, cracking. Do you know what you just did? He shouted. That algorithm is worth 20 billion, Silas finished calmly. The number hung in the air like a gunshot. Evelyn felt dizzy. Silas looked at Dorian. I'd rather lose money, he said, than let you control people with it. Dorian's eyes burned. You destroyed yourself, he hissed. Silas's gaze didn't flinch. No, he said. I chose. Evelyn's throat tightened. The misunderstanding in her chest shattered under the weight of what she was witnessing. This wasn't manipulation. This wasn't calculation. This was sacrifice. For her. Not because he needed her, because he valued her. Silas stepped closer to Evelyn, voice low. You saw a message, he said gently. You thought you were a tool. Evelyn's eyes filled, but she didn't let tears fall. I'm sorry, she whispered. Silas shook his head once. Don't apologize for protecting yourself, he said. Just don't run alone next time. Dorian watched them, face twisted with hatred. He took a step back, cornered. The badges advanced. The guards, suddenly unsure, stepped aside. Dorian's smile returned, poisonous. You'll regret this, he spat at Evelyn. Evelyn lifted her chin. I already did, she said calmly. And I'm done. Silas offered his hand. Evelyn hesitated for a heartbeat. Then she placed her hand in his, warm, steady, and together they walked out. Rain waited outside like an old friend. But this time, Evelyn didn't feel like it was washing her away. This time, it felt like it was cleansing the last of the past from her skin. A year later, the skyline looked the same, but Evelyn's life didn't. Phoenix Crown Logistics moved differently than Pierce Meridian ever had. It didn't cut corners to impress investors. It didn't worship speed at the cost of safety. It didn't treat people like replaceable parts. Evelyn built it like a system built to endure. Contracts were fair. Warehouses were maintained. Software updates were tested, not rushed. Efficiency mattered, but not more than human lives. The market noticed. Investors noticed too, but Phoenix Crown didn't chase them. Phoenix Crown made them chase. Silas, true to his nature, stayed largely out of public view. He didn't appear on magazine covers. He didn't take stage selfies. He worked in quiet rooms, shaping long-term strategy, ensuring Phoenix Crown's foundation stayed honest. Some called him a ghost. Evelyn knew better. He wasn't a ghost. He was the man who'd learned how to disappear so the world couldn't take from him anymore, until he chose to appear. For her. Vanterix Corporation began to crumble not from scandal, but from exposure. Once Silas's algorithm was open-sourced, Vanterix lost its unique leverage. Competitors adapted quickly. Dorian's secret weapon became public infrastructure. The market punished Vanterix's arrogance. Their stock wobbled. Their debt became more expensive. Their investors grew nervous. Phoenix Crown watched, patient. Evelyn didn't gloat. She waited. Then, when Vanterix's board began looking for strategic solutions, Phoenix Crown offered one. An acquisition. Clean. Legal. Inevitable. Dorian Crown fought it, of course. He did interviews, spun narratives, threatened lawsuits. But he was fighting gravity. When the final agreement signed, Vanterix's logo became a subsidiary under Phoenix Crown's umbrella. The empire that had once threatened to swallow Evelyn's life now sat beneath her in the corporate hierarchy like a tamed beast. Reporters asked Evelyn how it felt. Evelyn answered simply, "It feels correct." Graham Pierce's fall was quieter. No dramatic trial, no flashing sirens, just a slow erosion. Once the investigation began, his network of admirers evaporated. The people who'd applauded him stopped returning calls. The friends who'd laughed in courthouse hallways became busy. He lost his seat at tables that once welcomed him. He lost the merger. He lost his reputation. And because he had built himself on image, he lost himself. One afternoon, Evelyn returned to the Pierce Meridian building, now Phoenix Crown's Eastern Operations Hub. She walked through the lobby where she'd once waited as the CEO's wife. Now, employees nodded at her respectfully. She didn't demand it. She simply existed, and the building adjusted. As she stepped toward an elevator, a voice behind her said, "Evelyn." She turned. Graham stood near the entrance, hair slightly unkempt, suit cheaper, shoulders hunched. He looked like a man trying to remember how to be admired. His eyes were tired. "Can we talk?" he asked. Evelyn's expression stayed neutral. "About what?" she asked. Graham swallowed. I made mistakes," he said quietly. "I didn't realize—" Evelyn held up a hand gently, not to silence him, but to stop the familiar pattern of him rewriting history. "You realized," she said calmly. "You just thought it wouldn't cost you." Graham flinched. He glanced around as if hoping someone would rescue him from accountability. Then he looked at Evelyn again, desperate. "I need a job," he admitted. "Anything. I'll start low. Evelyn watched him. She didn't feel joy. She didn't feel vengeance. She felt a strange, quiet grief for the decades she'd spent believing he was better than he was. "I'm sorry," Evelyn said. Graham's eyes lit with hope. Then Evelyn finished. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I won't give you a place in my life again. Not as my husband, not as my employee." Graham's face tightened. "So you're just going to leave me with nothing?" he snapped, bitterness flaring. Evelyn nodded once. "No," she said. "You left yourself with nothing." Graham stared at her, anger and shame wrestling in his eyes. Then he turned and walked out. No dramatic speech, no final insult, just the sound of his footsteps fading into the city's noise, like a man exiting a story that no longer belonged to him. Evelyn watched him go, and felt her shoulders loosen, as if her body had been carrying his weight for years without noticing. That evening, Evelyn returned to a quiet townhouse in Brooklyn that she and Silas had bought, not because they needed more space, but because they wanted a place that felt like theirs. Not a trophy, a home. Silas was in the living room, sleeves rolled up, a laptop open on the coffee table. He looked up as Evelyn entered. "How was it?" he asked. Evelyn set her keys down. "I saw him," she said. Silas's gaze sharpened slightly. "And?" Evelyn exhaled. "He asked for a job," she said. Silas's expression darkened for a moment, protective anger, but he didn't speak. Evelyn walked to the corner of the room where a piano sat. Not the exact piano that had belonged to her mother. That one had been traced through charity paperwork and donation records, found eventually, but it had been damaged, moved too many times, neglected. Evelyn had stood beside it in a warehouse, fingertips on cracked wood, and cried quietly, not because it was ruined, but because it had survived at all. They restored what they could, and when it was finally brought home, it wasn't perfect. It was real. Evelyn sat on the bench and placed her fingers on the keys. She pressed one. A note rang out, slightly imperfect, slightly warm. She pressed another, and another. A simple melody her mother used to play when rain tapped the windows. Silas watched from the couch, silent. Evelyn didn't look at him as she played, but she felt him there, like steady rhythm behind a song. When she finished, silence filled the room. Not empty silence, a full one. Evelyn turned her head. "You lost 20 billion for me," she said softly. Silas shrugged slightly, uncomfortable with praise. "I lost leverage," he corrected. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "You lost money," she insisted. Silas leaned forward, elbows on knees. His voice was low. "Evelyn," he said, "I've had money. I've had power. I've had everyone pretend they cared because I was useful." He paused. "You were the first person who didn't need my name," he said. "You needed my honesty." Evelyn's throat tightened. Silas's gaze held hers. "And I needed yours," he added. Evelyn's breath trembled. She didn't move across the room. She didn't make a dramatic declaration. She simply nodded once and said, "I'm here." Silas nodded back. In that small exchange, something settled. A partnership, a choice, a life that didn't require anyone to shrink. Outside, rain began again, soft now, almost gentle. Evelyn listened to it, and for the first time in a long time, the sound didn't feel like punishment. It felt like music. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been told you were fine while your world was quietly falling apart, leave a message below. Not to relive the pain, but to remind yourself you're not alone.